When the bank teller looked at me with pity and pushed a piece of paper across the desk, I thought it was a system error. The balance on my savings account, the account that was supposed to hold my $120,000 house deposit, read exactly $0.00. I smiled, assuming it was a glitch. But the teller didn't smile back. She said, "Ma'am, your father withdrew the entire balance via wire transfer 3 weeks ago. My own parents had stolen 7 years of my life to save my brother. They thought I would just cry and accept it. They had no idea what I was capable of." Before we get into this absolute nightmare of a story, if you've ever dealt with toxic family members or the infuriating reality of a golden child, you are not alone. Hit that like button to show your support and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let me tell you how I destroyed the people who created me. My name is Clara. I'm 30 years old, and for the last decade I have been invisible. I don't mean that literally, of course. I went to family dinners, I sent birthday cards, I helped my parents fix their Wi-Fi. But in the grand play of my family's life, I was essentially a stagehand. The spotlight, the applause, and the overwhelming adoration were exclusively reserved for one person, my older brother, Julian. I always knew my place. While Julian was loud, charismatic, and endlessly demanding of attention, I was the quiet, responsible one. I became an architect. I worked 60-hour weeks. I lived in a tiny, drafty apartment with mismatched furniture and a leaking sink, purely so I could save every possible penny. My dream was simple. I wanted a house of my own. A sanctuary where I could paint the walls whatever color I wanted, plant a garden, and finally feel rooted. Over 7 grueling years, I saved $120,000. It was my pride. My safety net. My future. I had no idea what was coming. To understand how things got so bad, you have to understand my mother, Beatrice, and my father, Richard. My father was a senior loan officer at a regional bank. A man who prided himself on numbers and logic except when it came to his son. My mother was a woman who lived for appearances. Julian was a serial entrepreneur. That's the polite, LinkedIn-friendly term for a guy who refuses to get a real job and instead burns through other people's money on half-baked ideas. There was the app for dog walkers that crashed on day one. The luxury imported water company. The cryptocurrency consulting firm. Every single time Julian failed, my parents were there to catch him. They paid his rent. They leased his cars. They constantly told me, "Your brother just has a visionary mind, Clara. He takes risks. You're so lucky you're content with a simple, boring life." I bit my tongue. I let them think I was boring. I let them think I was simple. Because while Julian was posting photos on Instagram from rented yachts, I was watching my savings account grow. Things shifted about a year ago. Julian's latest venture, a high-end dropshipping business, had spectacularly imploded. He was 32, broke, and facing eviction from his luxury penthouse. I remember the family dinner where my mother broke down in tears over the pot roast. "He's just under so much stress," she sobbed, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. "The market is so unfair to young innovators. We have to help him, Richard." I sat there quietly, pushing my peas around my plate. I suggested, mildly, that perhaps Julian could get a job at an architectural firm like mine doing basic drafting to pay his bills. The look my mother gave me could have frozen a volcano. "Julian is a leader, Clara," she snapped. "He doesn't belong in a cubicle. Not everyone is built for mediocrity." I didn't argue. I just smiled and went back to my apartment. I was only a month away from reaching my savings goal, and then I was going to start house hunting. I was so close to my escape. I was wrong. The mechanics of my destruction actually began 5 years earlier. Back then, my father had suggested I open a high-yield savings account at the bank where he worked. "As an employee, I can get you a friends and family interest rate," he had said warmly. "We'll put it in a joint account so I can manage the promotional rates for you. You won't have to lift a finger." I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my father. For 5 years, I deposited a portion of every paycheck into that account. I checked the balance on my banking app almost daily. It was my little hit of dopamine. Looking back, the signs were there. My dad would occasionally ask probing questions about when exactly I planned to buy. He would talk about how the housing market was terrible and I should hold off for another year or two. I thought he was just giving me financial advice. I had no idea he was buying time. 6 weeks ago, my parents invited me over for a celebration dinner. I arrived to find Julian sitting at the head of the table, swirling a glass of expensive red wine, looking like the cat who had just swallowed a very fat canary. Julian has incredible news, my mother beamed, bringing out a cake. He just closed on a beautiful 4-bedroom house in the hills. I was genuinely shocked. A house. Julian, that's amazing. But I thought your dropshipping business went under? How did you qualify for a mortgage? A weird, tense silence fell over the room. My father cleared his throat and looked at his plate. Julian smirked. I have investors, Clara. People who actually believe in my vision and provided the capital I needed to secure the property outright. Cash. My mother chimed in. See, Clara? We told you his brilliance would pay off. You should really learn from your brother's ambition. I swallowed the humiliation. I congratulated him. I even felt a twinge of guilt for doubting him. That wasn't even the worst part. A week after that dinner, I found the perfect house. It was a charming mid-century modern fixer-upper with good bones and a huge oak tree in the backyard. The asking price was well within my budget. I called my realtor and we drew up the offer. All I needed was the proof of funds. I opened my banking app on my phone to take a screenshot of my balance. The app crashed. I tried again. It crashed again. Frustrated, I called my dad. Hey Dad, the banking app is acting weird. I can't see my savings balance. Can you pull a statement for me? I'm putting an offer on a house. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When my dad finally spoke, his voice sounded thin and strained. Oh honey, that's great. But the bank is migrating its servers this week. Everything is locked down. I can't access any statements right now. Give it a few weeks. A few weeks. Dad, the house will be gone by then. I'm sorry, Clara. My hands are tied. Just wait. You don't need to rush into buying a house anyway. He hung up quickly. A cold, heavy rock formed in my stomach. Something was very, very wrong. The next morning I took the day off work. I didn't go to my dad's branch. I drove to the main bank headquarters downtown. I walked up to a teller, handed over my driver's license and asked for a printed statement of my joint savings account. The teller typed on her keyboard. Her brow furrowed. He typed some more. Then she looked up at me with that look of profound pity I will never forget. Ma'am, there is no money in this account. The room spun. What do you mean? There should be over $120,000. She printed a piece of paper and slid it across the counter. There was, in black and white. 3 weeks prior, exactly 1 week before Julian's celebration dinner, an outgoing wire transfer of $120,000 had been executed. The destination? An LLC registered in Julian's name. Authorized and signed off by Richard, my father. Then the bank manager walked over. I explained the situation, trembling with rage and panic. Because it was a joint account, my father legally had the right to withdraw the funds. But the manager pointed out something crucial. For a wire transfer of that size, the bank required dual signatures from both account holders. Did you sign this wire authorization, Clara? The manager asked, showing me a digital scan. I stared at the screen. There was my signature. But I had never signed it. It was a flawless forgery. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't knock. I used my key, walked in, and threw the bank statement onto the kitchen island where my mother was chopping vegetables and my father was reading the paper. Where is it? I demanded. My voice was eerily calm, but my hands were shaking violently. My father looked at the paper, went pale, and took off his glasses. My mother just sighed, annoyed. Clara, stop being so dramatic, my mother said, wiping her hands on a towel. Julian needed liquidity. His investors pulled out at the last second and he was going to lose the house. We merely borrowed the money from your account. You weren't using it. I wasn't using it. I screamed. It was my life savings. I was putting an offer on a house today. And you can do that in a few years, my father interjected softly. Julian will pay you back. We structured it as an investment in his real estate portfolio. He needed a win, Claire. You're doing fine. You have a stable job. Julian was deeply depressed. We had to save him. You forged my signature, Dad. That's a federal crime. My mother stepped forward, her eyes flashing with anger. How dare you threaten your father? We raised you. We fed you. That money was sitting in an account doing nothing. Family helps family. You are being incredibly selfish. I looked at these two people. I realized with absolute clarity that they did not see me as a human being. I was a resource. A battery to power Julian's life. They expected me to cry, storm out, and eventually come back to apologize for being difficult. That's what I had always done in the past. But I had no idea what was coming, and neither did they. I didn't cry. I left the house, went to my car, and immediately called my boss, the lead partner at my architectural firm. He was an incredibly well-connected man. I told him everything. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in the mahogany-paneled office of one of the most ruthless litigation attorneys in the city. We started digging. My lawyer subpoenaed the financial records of Julian's LLC. We needed to put a lien on his new house immediately to freeze the asset. But when the financial records came back, my lawyer called me into his office, looking bewildered. "Clara," he said, tapping a stack of documents. "Julian didn't buy a house with your money." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "They threw a dinner party for the house." He showed us pictures. "He rented an Airbnb for the weekend to take pictures and throw a party," the lawyer explained. "Your brother didn't use the $120,000 for real estate. He transferred it directly into a high-risk offshore margin trading account. He was trying to day trade cryptocurrency to make up for his previous business debts." My stomach dropped. And the market crashed 3 days later. He got hit with a margin call. "The money is gone, Claire. All of it. Evaporated." I sat in silence. The realization washed over me. Julian hadn't bought a house. He had gambled away 7 years of my blood, sweat, and tears in less than a week. And my parents had sacrificed me for it. But then my lawyer smiled. A cold, predatory smile. "However," he said, "your father is a bank officer who forged a signature to execute a fraudulent wire transfer across state lines. That is wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity theft. If we take this to the FBI, your father will face up to 20 years in federal prison, and he will absolutely lose his pension." I looked at the lawyer. "I want my money back. I don't care how." I invited my parents and Julian to my tiny, drafty apartment. They walked in looking annoyed, clearly expecting me to beg or cry. "Make it quick, Clara," my mother said, refusing to sit down on my cheap sofa. "Julian has important meetings." I placed a thick folder on the coffee table. "Julian didn't buy a house," I said simply. "He day traded my money away. It's gone." My parents froze. They turned to Julian, whose face had instantly drained of all color. "Julian," my dad whispered. "Is that true?" Julian backed away. "I was going to make it back. It was just a temporary dip in the market. It wasn't my fault." My mother gasped, clutching her pearls. But before she could start making excuses for him, I held up my hand. "I don't care," I said. "Dad, here is a draft of the criminal complaint my lawyer is submitting to the FBI tomorrow morning. It details the forged signature, the IP address from the bank where you authorized the fraudulent wire, and the exact statutes of federal law you violated." My father collapsed into a chair. He couldn't breathe. "Please. You would send your own father to prison?" "You sent my future to the garbage," I replied smoothly. "However, my lawyer has drafted an alternative." I pulled out a second document. "Your house," I said, looking at my parents. "The 4-bedroom suburban home you paid off 5 years ago. It's worth exactly $450,000. You are going to sign a quitclaim deed transferring absolute ownership of that house to me right now. In exchange, I will sign a non-disclosure agreement and a release of claims regarding the stolen money." The silence in the room was deafening. My mother started screaming. She called me a monster, a sociopath, a terrible daughter. She said I was trying to make them homeless. "You have 30 seconds to decide," I said, pulling out a pen. Sign the house over to me or Dad spends the rest of his life in a federal penitentiary, and the bank strips you of your retirement pension anyway. Either way, you're losing the house. But this way, Dad doesn't wear an orange jumpsuit. My father looked at me. He looked at Julian, the golden boy who was currently cowering in the corner, chewing his fingernails. For the first time in his life, my father saw exactly who he had protected and who he had destroyed. With a shaking hand, my father took the pen. He signed the deed. He forced my crying mother to sign it too. It took 3 weeks for the legal paperwork to process. I officially own the home I grew up in. I served my parents with a formal 30-day eviction notice. They had to drain their remaining retirement savings to rent a small, cramped apartment across town. As for Julian, without my parents' money to bail him out, his creditors finally caught up to him. He was forced to declare bankruptcy and is currently working the night shift at a fast food drive-thru to pay off his legal fees. I moved into my new house last week. I've already started tearing down the awful wallpaper in my mother's old bedroom. Every time I hit the wall with a sledgehammer, I smile. I lost $120,000, but I gained a $500,000 property and the sweetest peace of mind I have ever known. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you have sent your dad to prison, or did I do the right thing by taking their house? Have you ever experienced family betrayal on this level? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe so you never miss out on another emotional story. Until next time, protect your peace and protect your bank accounts. See you in the next video.